The stars of the Orion spurs shimmered cold and distant as panic spread through the galactic Concord like a wave of fire.
Us.
For centuries, the Concord had known peace. Its member worlds, over 100 diverse alien species, had built a civilization of trade, science, and art, not war. Weapons were kept only as ceremonial relics, and battles were lessons in history books, not reality. But that world was gone now.
Out.
A new enemy had arrived without warning, and no one knew from where. The Vreek came like shadows in deep space, living machines that consumed everything in their path. They did not negotiate, did not speak, and could not be reasoned with. Entire star systems fell in hours. Space stations vanished mid-transmission. Ships sent to investigate came back as part of the swarm, twisted and changed. Their crews transformed into something unrecognizable. The Vreek were not conquerors. They were an infection, a living storm of logic and flesh. It's converting planets, cities, and life into part of their own growing intelligence. The Concord was helpless. Their ships, designed for exploration and peaceful escort, were no match. Defense. Grids failed. Supercomputers were infected. Biotechnologies, once seen as miracles of medicine, were turned into traps. Every weapon they used only gave the Vreek more to learn, more to adapt, more to twist. And so the Concord's leaders met in silence. In the dark of a moon deep within a protected system where the enemy had not yet reached. Fear hung over them, not just for their own species, but for everything they had built. No solution came. No fleet could stand against the swarm. It was in this silence that an ancient name was spoken: Earth. A name buried in archives, blacked out in maps, whispered in the oldest files of Concord records. Earth had once been contacted during the early days of galactic exploration, nearly 500 years ago. The first scout ships found a harsh world full of storms, radiation, and wild gravity shifts. Yet the species that lived there had not only survived, they had thrived. Their history was chaos, endless wars, disasters, and near extinction events. But they adapted. Every crisis made them stronger. The last contact had ended strangely. Earth sent back one message, translated only partially: do not return. We are not ready. Or perhaps you are not. Since then, nothing. The Concord had respected their isolation, fearing what might grow on a world so violent, so unpredictable. Yet now, with their backs to the edge of extinction, they had no other choice. A signal was crafted and sent, a request for aid, beamed in every known frequency. Using every known language, including Earth's last archived code, most expected nothing. Some feared that waking Earth might bring more danger. Others believed Earth was long dead, a victim of its own instability. But then the stars shifted. Within only 4 cycles faster than light should allow, reply came. It was short, composed of only 3 words in perfect ancient Earth standard. Message received. Stand by. The room fell into silence. Instruments were checked and rechecked. The signal was authentic, its origin matching the forbidden coordinates of the quarantined Sol system. Someone had answered. No further messages came. Days passed, then a week. The Concord sent probes, carefully, nervously. None returned. A strange interference field had enveloped Earth's space, invisible and silent, blocking all scans. The Concord panicked, convinced they had awakened a predator. Others clung to hope, desperate for salvation. Then, without warning, the sky tore open. A fold in space, unlike any warp or gate technology the Concord had ever seen, bloomed like a flower of dark light at the edge of a neutral system. Through it emerged a fleet. No 2 ships looked the same. Some were enormous, covered in jagged armor that shifted as if alive. Others were sleek and sharp, shaped like arrows dipped in shadow. There were no markings, no beacons, no transmissions, only silence. The Concord's patrols tried to hail them. No reply. Defensive drones approached and were simply ignored, floating away like dust beside titanic hulls. The fleet moved with precision, cutting across known space toward the Vreek front line. Not a single human had been seen. Not a single word had been spoken. the message was clear. Earth had heard the call. What they had sent was not diplomats, not scientists, not peacekeepers. They had sent a death fleet from a death world. And whatever the Concorde had expected, this was not it. The fabric of space itself trembled as a dark tear opened near the Concorde's outer defense lines. A swirling vortex unlike any known form of faster-than-light travel. It didn't behave like a wormhole, nor a warp gate. This was something else entirely. Something the Concorde's best minds couldn't explain. From that shadowed rift emerged a fleet unlike any ever recorded in the archives of galactic history. Their ships were massive and silent, shaped like jagged blades of night, coated in obsidian armor that seemed to absorb not only light, but energy scans as well. No engine signatures, no com beacons, no biosign readings, just movement, purposeful, direct, and unshaken. They came in formations tighter than any Concorde battle group, moving as if guided by one mind. The silence was what unnerved the Concorde most. No diplomatic messages, no alliance terms, no signs of culture or communication. Only a single transmission broadcast across every frequency. Evacuate the war front. We are not here to negotiate. The message repeated only once. Then, total silence. Within moments, fear spread like fire through the Concorde ranks. Some believed Earth had changed too, much during its isolation, and had become something far worse than even the Vrick. Others argued that humanity's message was a warning, not a threat. But no one could deny the tension that rippled across every Concorde world. Commanders hesitated. Civilian fleets began to scatter. Military leaders debated retreat, unsure if the humans would consider them obstacles. As the Concorde struggled to decide what to do, the human fleet advanced. They passed Concorde outposts without a glance, ignored escort ships entirely, continued toward the Vrick front with perfect eerie discipline. The first true test came near the collapsed world of Tharun, where the Vrick hive clusters had taken root in the debris of once glorious cities. The humans didn't hesitate. Without ceremony or build-up, they struck. Single ship long and flat, like a dark blade unleashed a beam of energy that didn't register on any sensor. There was no light, no heat, only silence, followed by the instant disintegration of a Vrick colony node. Other human ships deployed strange drones that moved too fast for the eye to follow. Weaving between asteroid fields and enemy vessels with impossible grace. Wherever they went, the Vrick dissolved, not exploded, not damaged, but simply ceased to exist. The Concorde commanders, watching from safe orbit, were stunned. No known technology could destroy Vrick that cleanly. Their hideous ability to regenerate, to adapt, had made them nearly invincible. But the human weapons didn't give them time to adapt. Every strike was precise. Every action had purpose. No movement wasted, no second shots needed. It was warfare transformed into a terrifying kind of art. The Concorde's top admiral, four-eyed strategist named Lorem Val, stared in disbelief as the entire Vrick infestation on Tharun was wiped out in under an hour. No casualties, no hesitation. The humans didn't stop to claim territory or rebuild infrastructure. They left the system the same way they had entered, silent and cold. Messages were sent again, this time pleading for dialogue. The Concorde wanted to understand. It wanted to speak to whoever led these ships. But once again, no response came. The only proof that the humans were still listening was the continued advance of the fleet. System by system, carving a path through Vrick territory with machine-like efficiency. The fear that had first taken root in the Concorde began to shift, slowly, into awe. These were not ordinary soldiers. These were not mere warriors. This was something older, something refined by centuries of preparation on a world so hostile that only the strongest minds and most unbreakable wills could survive. The stories began to spread. On mining colonies and science stations, in refugee camps and starship lounges, whispers passed from species to species that the humans had returned not as saviors, but as reapers of war. That they knew no fear, showed no mercy, and left no enemies behind. Some called them monsters, others called them protectors. But all agreed on one thing: They were not what the Concorde had expected. They were more. There was a moment, brief but unforgettable, when a Concorde recon ship drifted. Too close to one of the smaller human vessels, sensors locked, weapons prepared, but the humans didn't fire. Instead, they transmitted a map. It was a detailed layout of Reek hive positions to sectors ahead, marked with the most efficient paths for evacuation. Then, silence again. Message was clear. Humanity was not here to make friends. They were here to finish the fight. The Concorde had asked for help, and they had received it, but not in the form of diplomacy or peacekeeping. What had come through the stars was something born of endless struggle, trained by catastrophe, and shaped by a world that knew no kindness. This was Earth's answer. And whatever these humans had become in their centuries of isolation, they were something the galaxy had never seen before, and perhaps was not ready to understand. Inside the dark steel corridors of the human flagship Judgment's wake, silence carried weight. The air was sharp and sterile, humming softly with the pulse of systems too advanced for Concorde science to comprehend. Lights were dim, not out, of power-saving habit, but by designs, so that every alert, every flash, every flicker held meaning. Ambassador Trillin V, a member of the diplomatic circle of the Concorde, stood awkwardly at the airlock as the door sealed behind him fully, aware that no other ambassador had ever boarded one of these ships. Tall and covered in shimmering teal scales, Trellin had prepared for this moment with all the cultural training available. Yet he felt like a child walking into the heart of a storm, to silent guards, clad in dark armor without a single symbol or marking, escorted him through the warship's hallways. Every step revealed more of the human's design, functional, cold, but terrifyingly purposeful. This was not a place of ceremony or comfort. It was a weapon that wore the shape of a ship. When he finally reached the command deck, Admiral Lin Voss greeted him with a nod, her presence sharp and unwavering. She stood tall, armored not out of necessity, but as part of who she was built for battle, calm as stone. Her voice was even controlled, as she gestured toward a chair that looked more like a restraint harness than furniture. "You wanted answers?" she said. "Ask," and Trellin did. He asked why Earth had remained silent for centuries. They had returned now. Why their fleet fought without hesitation, without mercy, without communication. And slowly, the Admiral answered. Earth had been left alone, not by accident, but by warning. Long ago, before the Concorde ever became a unified council, Earth faced collapse not once, but many times. Wars had scorched continents, plagues reshaped nations. Artificial intelligences rose in rebellion, followed by climate disasters, economic collapses, and internal chaos. Humanity stood on the brink over and over again. Each time, they didn't die. They adapted. Trellin listened, shocked, as Voss described a planet where survival was earned, not guaranteed. Where children trained in virtual disaster zones. Where every citizen learned to operate machinery. Where every school drilled not just math and science, but crisis response and battlefield tactics. Earth had become something else. Not a home, but a crucible. "We turned our planet into a proving ground," Voss said quietly. "If you could survive there, you could survive anywhere." Trellin struggled to understand. His own people had evolved in peaceful harmony with nature, solving conflicts through diplomacy, building a society where cooperation replaced conquest. To hear that Earth had embraced its chaos and grown stronger through it was disturbing, but also deeply impressive. He asked about the ships, the weapons that seemed to think on their own, the soldiers who moved like machines but struck with terrifying precision. Voss explained that every ship was more than metal. They were AI partnered, bonded with their captains from birth. Each soldier went through training simulations so real that a dozen virtual deaths were part of the standard curriculum. Survival was not assumed, it was earned. The ambassador asked if humanity had lost its soul in the process. Voss simply said, "We found it in fire." What the Concorde saw as brutality, the humans saw as preparation. Peace was a luxury that Earth could never afford, so they built strength instead. Strength not to conquer, but to endure. "We don't start wars," Voss said, her eyes sharp as she looked out across the stars from her viewing platform. "But we end them."
Ali.
Notice the command deck had no central throne, no banners or personal marks of rank. Everything was clean, precise, and built for function. The Admiral wore no medals. Crew operated without speaking, connected through neural interfaces and silent drills. It was all unlike anything he had ever seen. He realized then that humanity had not been waiting to rejoin the galaxy. They had been watching, preparing, and when the Vreek threat grew too great, when the Concorde finally asked for help, Earth did not hesitate, because hesitation was a luxury they had trained to erase. Trellin tried one last question. "Do you feel anything when you destroy them?" Admiral Voss took a long breath before answering. "We feel relief, that it's them and not us, because we know what it means to lose everything." As the ambassador was escorted back to his transport, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen and heard. The Death Fleet had come not as saviors, nor monsters, but as survivors of a world that never gave them peace. Earth had paid a price to become what it was, an empire of soldiers forged by storms, famine, and war. And now they stood between the galaxy and annihilation. The Concorde had summoned humanity with hope, but now understood the cost of that request. Because when you ask a Deathworld for help, you do not get compassion, you get results. Cold, calculated, effective, and unstoppable. The war had shifted. What began as a quiet, relentless advance by the human fleet through Vreek-infested space was now something else entirely. The Concorde watched in stunned silence as Earth's armada unveiled weapons beyond their understanding, machines that disassembled matter at the molecular level, invisible fleets that phased in and out of known space, and strange silver clouds that hovered over enemy swarms and simply erased them. These clouds, known only by code names like Whispers or Threadfall, were composed of intelligent nanites that moved like a living storm, slipping through armor, breaking apart code, and leaving only silence where the Vreek once stood. Even the human ships themselves moved in ways the Concorde could not explain, bending around gravity, splitting into mirrored doubles, or simply vanishing before reappearing on the far side of a battle. Their strategy was layered, unpredictable, and deeply terrifying, yet it worked. For the first time since the Vreek appeared, they retreated. Hive clusters collapsed, command signals broke apart, and the terrifying hum of their advance began to fade. The Vreek, long thought unstoppable, had finally met something even they could not consume quickly enough. A Deathworld's fury sharpened into perfection. But then something changed. A small skirmish erupted near the ruined system of Veltora, where one of the lighter human assault ships, the Vigilant Star, was isolated during a stealth operation. For reasons still unclear, the Vreek swarmed with unusual speed and coordination. Breaking through the ship's defenses, the Vigilant Star disappeared from the fleet's network in under 6 seconds. Recovery teams found only fragments and traces of Vreek biomatter feeding on the shattered hull. That was the moment everything shifted again. Within 2 standard hours, a new form of Vreek ship appeared on the battlefield. Its shape was jagged and wrong, but its movements were unmistakable. The Concorde recognized the patterns. It moved like a human ship. It predicted attacks, countered stealth, even deployed mock versions of the human nanite clouds. Humanity's greatest strength, their unpredictability and technology, was being used against them. The Vreek had consumed the Vigilant Star, not just physically, but intellectually. They had begun to learn. The next few battles were brutal. The humans still won, but now with cost. Concorde observers recorded the destruction of 2 more smaller vessels, and several captains reported systems being infiltrated mid-combat, as if the Vreek were rewriting code in real time. The human fleet tightened formation, slowed its advance, and shifted from offense to control. Inside Judgment's wake, Admiral Lynn Voss stood before the holographic war table, watching new Vreek forms grow in complexity with every encounter. The enemy was evolving faster now, almost as if their hunger had found something it had long been searching for, a true challenge. The Concorde's ambassador, Trellin VA, was present once again, watching the Admiral with growing concern. You still win? he asked quietly. Voss didn't look at him when she answered. We don't fight to win. We fight so there's something left when we lose. Then she turned to her command crew and gave a single, chilling order. Prepare final protocol. Those 3 words sent a quiet ripple through the deck. No one asked questions. They simply obeyed. Trellin did not know what final protocol meant, but even without details, he understood the weight of it. This was not a standard maneuver. This was something else, something dark, dangerous, and desperate. As the command ship moved to high orbit over the contested region known as the Vreek, route line a massive stretch of space housing, interconnected. Hives buried within drifting planetary cores, the fleet began to shift into unfamiliar formations. Long-range weapons were disabled. Stealth systems were powered down. Instead, large ships began to open strange ports along their sides, exposing glowing spheres that emitted low, untraceable pulses. Concord scientists tried to study them but were denied access. When one asked what the devices were, a human technician simply said, "We're turning space against itself."
Out.
Final protocol had never been used before. In Earth's military archives, it was a last resort of strategy developed in simulations. It's feared even by the strategists who designed it. It involves the deliberate destabilization of local spacetime, creating rifts that would collapse both matter and information across a battlefield. Not just destruction, but deletion. Not just silence, but erasure. Everything within the rift zones, ships, Vreek, energy, even light would vanish.
The risk
Was immense. If miscalculated, the protocol could chain react into surrounding systems, taking not only the Vreek, but the human fleet with it. But there was no other choice. The Vreek had adapted. It had copied enough to become dangerous in new, unpredictable ways. If they learned to fully replicate human tactics and systems, no force in the galaxy could stop them. The countdown began. Human ships started to hum with a low-frequency resonance that caused Concord instruments to fail. Lights across Judgment's wake flickered as gravity generators prepared for forced collapse. Yet the Vreek, drawn by the signals or perhaps sensing something unnatural, began to swarm. Tens of thousands of them. The sky lit up with chaos. The final battle had begun not for victory, but for survival. Earth's gamble was about to unfold. The stars were quiet in the aftermath. It was not the quiet of peace. It was the kind of silence that follows something enormous, something irreversible. From the edge of the route line, Concord's remaining observers watched helplessly as the human fleet executed the final phase of what they called the Deathgate Protocol. Space itself twisted as the human ships triggered their engineered collapse, creating an artificial singularity, a trap not of gravity alone, but of time and dimensional compression. The Vreek, drawn in by the false signals and baited by what they thought were vulnerable targets, rushed in with the full force of their hives. But what waited for them was not weakness. It was extinction. The singularity expanded and then folded, in on itself, dragging matter, light, and energy into a pocket dimension that was mathematically impossible to escape. For a few moments, the battlefield glowed with strange blue arcs, like lightning caught between mirrors. Then came the silence. The human fleet was gone. So were the Vreek. Nothing remained but empty stars and quiet sensors. The Concorde sent probes, then scout ships, but found only fragments of metal drifting in gravityless voids. It was impossible to tell who they had belonged to. Days passed, then weeks. Memorials were planned. For the first time in centuries, Concorde worlds rang their ancient morning bells. It's not just for their own, but for those they never truly knew, those who had come from a forgotten Deathworld and sacrificed everything without asking for reward. People spoke of Admiral Voss and the silent fleet that vanished to save them. Songs were written, statues were designed. But even then, doubt lingered. Had the humans truly been defeated? Had they been lost forever in the trap they built to contain? The enemy no one could answer. Then, 21 days after the event, long-range sensors in the Telnari drift picked up a strange signal weak, nearly lost in background radiation. Concorde engineers traced the source and found a single ship drifting through broken space. Its hull scorched and twisted, engines barely active, energy signatures flickering like dying stars. It was Judgment's wake. The flagship had survived. Emergency crews were sent at once. When they boarded the crippled ship, they found only a few crew members conscious. Most in cryosleep or injured beyond what alien medicine could understand. But Admiral Lynn Voss was alive, seated in the central chair of the bridge. Still strapped in, still awake, her hand gripping the armrest as if she had never left it. Her eyes opened slowly as the rescue teams approached. She asked for no ceremony. She gave no long speech. When they asked her what had happened, she simply said, "It worked." And when they asked what they should tell the Concord Council, she answered with words that would be recorded, quoted, and remembered for generations. If you ever ask for help again, be prepared for what answers. Then she closed her eyes and allowed herself to sleep, for the first time in what must have been weeks. The Concord rebuilt in the months that followed, not just their ships or cities, but their understanding of what power meant. They had believed. Strength came from peace, that reason would always overcome rage, that unity was enough to face any enemy. But Earth had shown them a different truth. Sometimes survival required monsters shaped not by cruelty, but by necessity. Humanity had not come with hope in their hands. They had come with fire and precision and sacrifice. They had given everything not because they were asked, but because they chose to do what no one else could. Across the stars, the story spread. On trading posts and science stations, in the floating temples of the Valari and the underwater cities of the Zillions, people told the tale of the Death Fleet. Children learned the name Lynn Voss before they learned their own star systems. Entire species began rethinking their defense doctrines. Some saw the humans as a terrifying warning. Others saw them as the ultimate guardians. All agreed on one thing: never forget what sleeps on Deathworld Earth. Their planet remained silent once. More, no new signals, no messages. The fleet that returned was smaller than the one that had left, and humanity did not ask for thanks. They simply vanished again, like a storm passing through the sky, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. The Vriq were gone. The Concord had survived. But in the quiet of their rebuilt worlds, many found themselves looking toward the distant stars, wondering what else had been hidden, what other powers slept in the dark. And somewhere, on a world wrapped in wild oceans and storm-lit mountains, Earth turned quietly once Marit's people waiting, preparing, watching, just in case. Someone, somewhere, called again.